Morning seminar. Ben Bonfils is away earning some money for us, I think, so he's asked me to look after the presentation of the seminar this week and next week, which I'm very happy to do. You all know this seminar series goes right back to the very beginning of the JK, so it's 50 years old, thereabouts. And, we've had lots of great seminars over the years from us, from our students, from our staff, from other parts of the university, and occasionally we get somebody from completely outside our comfort zone altogether, somebody from another part of either our business or somewhere else completely. That's one of the occasions we have on today. I'm very pleased to welcome Richard Marshall. Richard is actually got two claims to be one of us. Number one, he did mineral process engineering at UQ about 20 years ago, so he's a real person, he's a mineral processing engineer. And he is the son of Bob Marshall, and those of you who remember Bob down in the workshop, who was here for, we decided, about 26 years, 27 years, John? 28. 28? Time, did you? Time flies when you're enjoying yourself. So Bob was really the heart of our workshop business for many, many years, and Richard is his son, who, despite all evidence to the contrary, went off and did mineral processing at UQ. So he's been in the game about nearly 20 years, I guess, now, in the industry. He's done work in the coal area, coal preparation. He's worked for construction companies and engineering companies, design, picked up an MBA on the way. And so he knows the business very well, and he's sort of accumulated a real interest in technology development and innovation. How do you do it? What's the best way to do it? And he's spotted a very interesting way to go about it, which is to exploit these very complex, sophisticated networks of existing information about IP, so patents and technology organisations and all those sorts of things, which are all out there and pretty much impossible to understand as an individual. So you need a lot of help, you need sophisticated software to do that. So it's kind of doing innovation at the keyboard in a sort of way. So he's courageously gone out to develop this idea himself. He had a slightly more confronting title before, didn't you? It was technology development or something, for technology collision. And the word collision was in there somewhere, which I really like the idea, the confronting idea, and he's kind of softened it a bit. So it's a bit more kind of pompous now, but harmless. Language-based data mining for technology development. And I think the key interest for us today is another way to do innovation, and data mining is going to be a big deal for the future. So I think we've got some good things to learn. So persuade us.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I would say that Dale will be pretty chuffed he got a mention here today. He's turned into a bit of a motivational speaker since he's left this place. I told him I was coming to do a seminar, and he had some words of wisdom for me, which were, don't stuff it up. So, you know him? Yeah, that's pretty typical. So, that's it. What we're going to be talking about is language-based data mining for technology development. Talking about a collision of different elements of intellectual property. And I'll show you a way of doing that. So, this is what we're going to be talking about. We'll look at intellectual property network analysis, what it actually is. We'll look at the hidden value of intellectual property, how we might take advantage of existing intellectual property, the quantity and quality of information that's actually out in the stratosphere these days, the type of networks we can look at and interrogate. We'll go through a network analysis. Now I've put myself out there and I've done one on common use and energy efficiency. And we'll look at the end of the day, the value that this approach actually delivers. So, when I talk about language-based data mining, I'm talking about interrogating one of these. It's not a Jackson Pollock, it's an intellectual property network. And this is a patent network investigating common use and energy efficiency. Now, you may ask why interrogate language instead of numbers? And the answer is pretty simple. No one else, as far as I know, is doing it. In the energy and resources sector, but also language can provide us insights and context around topics that numbers just can't provide. For example, we can look at technical descriptions and interrogate those, and we can even pick up on emotions in different in different text. Now, the analysis of languages you'll see here today can be actually quite powerful. And it's not to say I won't be interrogating numbers in my business going forward, but this for me was the natural place to start. Now, before we get into this, I just wanted to put a bit of context around why I believe this type of analysis is a very important step in technology development going forward. A few years ago, I was working for a company that wanted to break into providing engineering services into the minerals industry. They were very successful in the oil and gas and chemical sectors, but they were looking to diversify their business further. And we found that while they had certain applicable skills to break into the minerals industry, the time frame for them to actually do it by organic growth and make any real impact was 5 to 10 years. So this wasn't very palatable to them. Like everybody else, they want growth and they want it quickly. So to meet their timetable, they had to look at an expensive acquisition. Again, that didn't meet their needs. So one advantage they had was they were owned by a large technology developer, and we took advantage of this and sought opportunities to expand on the horizons of their existing technologies in minerals. Now, it was at this point, when I was searching through a whole lot of patents and papers and trying to find opportunities for them, that the following 2 points drove me down my current path. Intellectual property's got a huge, an enormous hidden value that no one exploits. And there's so much intellectual property out there, and it's diluted by so much information that it's getting harder and harder to make sense of it all. So here you can see a couple of trends in the valuation of intellectual property as recognised by some leading financial reports and institutions. For example, US companies, universities and governments fail to take advantage of $1 trillion worth of revenue from patents annually. Okay? It shows that those who own intellectual property might not be able to take might not value it highly or be able to take advantage of that value. And there's many reasons that this can happen. A company or a university or a government might not have the expertise to develop the ideas properly. Any previous attempt that they made may have yielded good technical results but have failed economically due to poor implementation. Maybe the timing wasn't right for the implementation. Maybe the person responsible for the development of that technology left the company and did not leave a succession plan or expertise behind. The idea could have relied on another technology and was blocked. Patent blocking is a very big thing out there in the corporate world. The idea may not have been suitable for the industry that the owner worked in and was parked. Or finally, and most commonly, there may have been a lack of available finances to continue development. These reasons, however, don't mean intellectual property should not have a value. In fact, it may have a significant value in an industry that was not originally intended for. So here's some more examples. Intellectual property assets are generally unrecognised or off balance sheet and invisible to shareholders, potential investors and company executives. Some, however, do see its value. For example, when Motorola Mobility was acquired by Google, Google paid a 63% premium on the previous closing share price to acquire essentially 24,500 patents. So what happens when intellectual property is delivered its value? At some stage, a piece of intellectual property that's delivered considerable strategic advantage internally to a business, maybe the improved operational efficiency of a process, will eventually cease delivering the same magnitude of advantage. Okay, so competitors will at some stage catch up by developing their own solutions or own similar solutions. So one way of extending the strategic advantage of intellectual property is to offer it for sale to your competitors, to make them reliant on you for subsequent versions. So a good example of that is the iPhone, right? We could say, we've got a piece of intellectual property here, we'll take iPhone version 3 to our competitors. Meanwhile, we're in the background developing iPhone version 4, 5 and 6 and making people rely on us to do things. Now, the quote on the right-hand side of the slide there basically drives the heart of what we're trying to do at Endellion. Okay? We had what often happens in science, which is that we had an apparatus whose purpose had come to an end, and we had a problem that needed solving, and we married them up. Okay? This comes from a BBC technology article looking at the production of purer than pure silicon that researchers have now learned to produce in the lab. Previously, it was produced in a very unsophisticated fashion in a nuclear reactor, and there was only a very short supply of pure than pure silicon. And it's one area that researchers have identified as important in overcoming capacity constraints in quantum computing. Now, I like the heading there. If I've sinned further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. And I like this statement because it says, let's not reinvent the wheel each time. It's easy to say and sometimes harder to do, but it's undeniable that research and development can be significantly advanced by what's already known. So at Endellion, what we aim to do is to help companies realise their internal value by taking advantage of existing intellectual property, by finding new uses for it or new markets, and finding other existing technologies with which it can be collided to create new and disruptive technologies. But how do we cost effectively and accurately increase the probability of finding solutions when we have so much information to sort through? How do we deal with and comprehend the vast amounts of information that is generated and stored around the globe? Now we know there's great opportunity out there, but it can be extremely difficult to pin down. So internet search engines used to be the answer, but search results these days have been hijacked by sponsors, and search engine optimization drives traffic to predetermined websites. A lot of the time, the information being sought by a person is actually buried on lower ranked pages. So you've got to ask yourself, how often have you got past page 10 on a Google search? One person recently told me that he searches images on Google rather than using text because it's easier for him to interpret visual clues rather than just read. So these are the key questions I asked myself when I first started looking for a technology search and categorisation tool. How much opportunity are we losing due to information overload? How do we better link and organise data to allow us to recognise opportunities? And how do we increase the probability of achieving useful technology collisions while reducing the cost of the analysis? My answer is that we can reduce opportunity loss by the visualisation and interrogation of complex intellectual property networks. Networks that are just too difficult to comprehend as lines of text on a computer screen. So what type of networks can we generate? Okay, by using new and very advanced language-based interrogation and network visualization software, we can generate independent networks looking at private companies, news and blogs and patents, and we can do this in very quick time. But we're not just limited to those databases. We can get any language-based network, we can get, as long as a language is as long as we have data in the language format, okay, we can analyse any language-based network. So let's look at one, because I'd like to provide perfect examples. We'll look at the comminution energy efficiency example. Now, generating the search data. Before we start, I want to stress that in this example, you may know a lot of the findings I'm about to show you, or with luck you might not. So I've studied this area in detail. I haven't studied this area in detail, apart from the analysis of this network, so I look at it with fresh eyes. What I'm keen to stress, however, is the speed of this analysis. I interrogated that network in about 2.5 weeks. Okay, that's over 3,000 patents that have been searched through, categorised, and looked at. It took a bit longer to analyse the data in some detail, but that was about 1 to 2 weeks to come up with some conclusions. Okay? The power of the approach I'm going to show you is the ability to search and categorise visually without having to resort to spreadsheets. Okay? And the real power behind it is that we can eliminate unimportant data very quickly and then focus in on the data that actually really matters. So to generate the network, we use a typical Boolean search on the World Intellectual Property Organisation website. The results are sorted by relevance, and we generate the network from the top 3,000 patents. So how does the network get generated? Okay, as you can see on the slide, each patent represents a node in the network. Okay, and it's important to note that when the network has been generated, the Boolean search term is no longer relevant. The software uses natural language algorithms to compare all of the language inside of those patents. Okay? Clustering algorithms then determine on a statistical basis how similar the language is between patents. If it's very similar, it draws a link and then brings the patent into a cluster. If the language is just similar, then it draws links between clusters. Okay, so we'll just go through a quick video to show a network in operation. So through the connecting and clustering algorithms, okay, the software is essentially completed a segmentation of the network on a number of levels. Okay, on the right hand side you can see just flick through the segmentation there and you can see the names of the clusters. As we zoom in, you can see the nodes are of different sizes. Okay, and that's related to a statistical measure called degree. I'll discuss this a bit later, but however, the higher the degree, the bigger the node. Okay, you can see that as I change the level of segmentation, you'll see the colours change there, and that gives us a high that you can look at it in more detail, more segments in more detail. You can zoom in to a patent in a particular cluster, and we can examine a whole lot of patents there in that cluster, or we can examine each one individually and find out which patents it's actually directly connected to. So we just clicked on the microwave treatment of ores there as another example. Okay, if we now zoom back out, we can see there's a number of different useful views that allow us to interrogate a network. So the main one will be a scatter plot of degree between the centrality, and I'll go through those with you a bit later again as well. And we can also look at a timeline of when the patents were actually generated, and that becomes very useful also. This is all in real time, by the way, so that's the software just doing it as a video. Finally, we can also segment the data in a number of different ways, whichever way we really want to do, by tagging the patents. Okay, we can do things like take out the patents which we wish to ignore, so those ones that don't have any relevance to the analysis we're looking at, and then we can also keep the ones we like. You see a whole lot of other tags on the right hand side of the page there that relate to some segmentation I'm going to show you. So, similar to when studying the development of a new mine, okay, the greatest value is actually added at the conceptual phase of a project where options are eliminated, so more time can be spent on studying the options that may actually deliver something for you. This is no different. Some of the greatest value of this type of analysis is the early elimination of non-relevant data. Okay, so we'll just take a bit of a different view of the network. There it is, it's a snapshot there. And we can look at the clustering in a bit more detail. So here we've got biomass, which is very related to gasification in pyrolysis. Biomass uses gasification as an incineration tool to produce power. And we've got gasification and pyrolysis of biomass related to coal and fuel. Gasification is obviously used for power production. Pulp and paper, down here is related to biomass as well. So you can see that the clustering algorithms have really done their job. They've actually found very good relations between each of the patents. Grinding mills up here and crushers. Grinding mills are related to the media cluster over here as well. It's not very apparent through the links because they pass through the coal and fuel cluster, but trust me, that is a direct link there between those two. And interestingly, right down the bottom there we've got ores and extraction, which shows no connection to grinding mills. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. I've got a view on that. So the common question that people also have about is the distance between the nodes themselves and the patents themselves, or the clusters. Generally, the further apart they are, the less related they are, but that's about as much as you can tell from that. So, what can a segmented patent network tell us in quick time? In this case, we can determine whether energy efficiency in the network is more related to the comminution equipment or to the process within which the equipment is deployed. We can look at innovation trends. When we take time into account, we can have a look at which industry is showing the most innovation with respect to energy efficiency, and you can also determine where the innovation we are seeking is occurring and who's doing it. So from a business perspective, if I wanted to know of a person who is actually doing a lot of innovation on a topic that I really want to research or do some work with, I can actually find them from a patent search as well and bring them and post them if I want to. The let's have a look at some of the segmentation. So I used the tagging system in the earlier video, and we segmented the network in a number of different ways. Okay, so when you consider energy efficiency, comminution equipment is responsible for about 22% of the patents. 76% of the patents are related to methods or processes that employ comminution. Under the industry segments chart, we can see what I've termed an industrial application makes up 30% of the patents. Now, that industrial application has been broken up into a number of different segments as well. So we've got cement, pigments, slags, a number of different things. I've also done the same with energy as well. Now, multiple patents, this one just here, means that the patents or the patents can be used across multiple industries. So it wasn't a big surprise to find out that those patents were essentially related to the equipment. So we've got 21% just there, 22% just there, so it matches up quite well. Interestingly, minerals makes up 11% of the patents in the network when we search for energy efficiency. We can have a look at a timeline of the patents categorised as processes or methods, and what the timeline tells us is that across most of the different types of industries, in the short space of time between 2007 to 2014, we had an increase in patent filings of processes using comminution. And most of these processes claimed a higher energy efficiency, and this is not necessarily because of the comminution. If you look at the table, you can see which industries experienced an increase in patent filings post-2007. Those are the ones in the green text. And if we examine the boom that we've just been through, I wouldn't think that the industries that have experienced that increase in process patent filings would surprise anyone. And I think that they're an indication of developing nations rather than those that are driven by consumerism. So, for example, you've got energy, minerals, food, agriculture, and medical. If we focus on an equipment timeline, we've also, in the chart there, we've also segmented the equipment patents into different types of mills or comminution equipment as well. Equipment defined as other, which has 18% of the patents, can be considered as refinements around existing equipment, so screens, trommels, feed pipes, bearings, or equipment that uses grinding in its development process. So there was a couple of patents here looking at hydrogen storage or thermoelectric devices as well. So what I take from this is that while the rate of development in energy efficient grinding equipment patents increased post-2007, it wasn't as much as the more energy efficient processes that use grinding as an element of the process. So a question you could ask is, can we do more on the grinding equipment side to increase energy efficiency? Or do we feel that comminution is made more energy efficient by the integration of other components of a process, or by placing a focus on the elements of a process that lead up to comminution? So how do we find clues to potential development opportunities? We've just looked at how we might be able to quickly draw some information out by segmenting a network. But we can also use network statistics, and in particular those metrics associated with graph theory. I'm not going to go into graph theory today. I'm not quite sure whether many of you have heard about that before. I'm happy to talk about that outside of here. And we can also use information gleaned from other networks. Okay, so I've prepared a network looking at news and blogs using the same search that I use to generate the patent network. And we compare those and get clues to actually draw some information out of our patent network. Okay, but nothing at the end of the day beats just delving into a network or delving into some data in detail. So, network statistics. We generally use two measures when looking at it through this software. Degree and betweenness centrality. Degree allows you to identify representative patents within a network. Okay, so the higher the degree of a patent, the more patents it's connected to. So a patent with a degree of 5 will be connected to directly to 5 other patents. Okay, and betweenness centrality is a frequency, a node, or a patent that appears in the shortest path between other entity pairs. Excuse me. It helps develop key patents connected with multiple patents. So when we were talking about graph theory before, I kind of relate that to a GPS. So if you want to find the shortest path between points A to C, a point called B will have the highest between the centrality if it's a street corner and appears in all the shortest paths between those 2 points A to C. Now, a person like me who's looking for new technology developments or disruptive technologies that no one's discovered just yet, I'd be looking on the periphery of a network, okay, for patents of low degree and low between the centrality, or what we might term as strategic white space. So we'll start looking at that stuff. So another quick video of how we can best use network statistics. So we'll go to the scatter plot view that we had earlier of degree in between the centrality. And we'll do a quick search on breakage. Okay, and it highlights 4 different patents. Okay. First 2 patents come directly from here, the University of Queensland. Okay, the third relates directly to a pulverizer, and I looked for it, didn't look to be anything new. And the 4th reference is grinding aids for dispersion. Okay, if you look at the UQ patent for predicting breakage, it has one of the highest between the centralities. Now, this means it's a key patent connecting multiple patents, and it's seen as important to the network. Okay, now this makes sense. A patent looking at breakage makes sense in a network with a patent looking at breakage in a network looking at comminution, having a high between the centrality makes a lot of sense in this case. Okay? Now I looked at this patent further, and it shows a direct connection to another industry, agriculture and livestock feed. Now I started thinking about this. It might already be happening, but maybe this could lead to someone here from this department talking to someone, say, in industries like another department in the university in pharmaceuticals, where it's very important to optimise particle size distribution of a drug for delivery to the body, okay, so the body can absorb that drug as quickly as possible. So I'd like to understand whether that's an area of collaboration between 2 departments in the university that could occur. That's the type of thing we're talking about, trying to link different elements of a business, different elements of a university, different elements of anything, so we can actually develop new and exciting things. We'll look at other networks, okay, to help us find some other potential development clues. So this is a network that I prepared using the same search terms as for the patent network, okay, and news networks are pretty helpful because they help us determine the issues that are currently being discussed or the flavour of the month. Okay, and if we keep a regular tab on what's happening in the news network, we can see how conversations change over time and keep us up to date as possible on different topics as they become important. You can see I've highlighted 3 areas here. We've got Chinese equipment, we've got sorting, and we've also got some conversations that were happening with SIG. So let's look at the Chinese equipment one, and we go back to the timeline, okay? And we saw earlier, we've got the timeline we saw earlier, and when I did a look through that timeline, or look through the patents, I found that about 53% of the equipment patents in the network have been filed by Chinese companies post-2007, as opposed to 4% from pre-2007. So that's not surprising, and it does highlight that with the increasing sophistication of developing nations like China, who can throw many very smart people at a problem, okay? Maybe in Australia we need to start doing things a bit differently. And maybe things like what I'm showing you today might help us stay ahead or even keep up with the curve these days. We go back to the news network and we look at the news that Autotech and Tomba Sorting have teamed up to provide services to the mining industry. Okay, so we go back to that plot of the degree in between centrality, and we've done a search on sorting, We've got 12 different patents that have popped up there. Okay, and it's no surprise to see that the waste or biomass industry have a number of sorting related patents, but we can focus in on one. Okay, that's this one just here. I don't know why that one here turned up. And it's referencing an X-ray transmission sorting device. Now, I understand that sorting is a hot topic around the place at the moment, and so I've included a quick video near the end of the presentation that demonstrates how quickly we can develop a patent network before interrogation, and we'll do that on sorting. Now, there's any more similar examples that I could do like this. We've got a look at blasting, we've got microwaves, we've got a look at energy audits. They're all in that network. Okay, but you guys know all this stuff, and we should probably move on. Okay, we go back to the news network, and we'll use the fact that CWC have turned up, or SEEK have turned up, and we'll use that as another clue. Now, prompted by a discussion I found on the SEEK website, I downloaded a paper by Peter Radicevsky. Okay. And investigated what it may take to recover waste heat from grinding mills, and I found this really interesting. Now, waste heat energy recovery is prevalent in processes that use high temperatures, but not in lower temperature minerals processing plants. So I look at that, and I think that's the reason why the minerals and ores patents were not central to the network. For example, cogeneration is common to high temperature processes as found in coal-fired power stations, biomass, gasification, cement, and pulp and paper. Okay? So I searched for a few of the elements proposed by Peter for recovering energy from waste heat and grinding mill. Now, you'll notice from now on that all the patents highlighted will fall in the area of low degree, low between the centrality on the scatter plot. And this might indicate that they might be good opportunities for research and development going forward as strategic white spaces for the minerals industry. Now, in this case, let's go back. In this case, I searched for insulation and found a patent on insulation in a smelter, and that's a pretty tough environment. Okay, so could we learn enough from insulation of a smelter that we can apply that to a grinding mill? Just a question, I'm not sure. Look at sealing. Peter also nominated more effective sealing of a mill to improve waste heat recovery. Could we learn something from vertical roller mills if they employ effective sealing arrangements? Now, I mentioned earlier that energy efficiency of a lot of the processes contain patent networks as a result of waste heat recovery. Now, this recovery occurs at temperatures high enough to operate cogeneration circuits. But in a lot of minerals processing systems, recovery of energy from cogeneration is just not feasible. So what about if we investigated the use of thermoelectric or thermomagnetic systems? These systems may allow energy recovery at lower temperatures in the future, and they only need a small temperature differential to work. So for example, we did a search on a thermomagnetic generator, and we found a patent for recovering waste heat from slurry. So could we use the heat recovered from the slurry discharge from a mill to power the discharge pump? So finally, as I said before, there's no substitute for being able to dive into the details. So as I was reviewing the system in detail, I found a patent that claims lining systems that reduce the weight of a ball mill, and as a result reducing energy consumption. Now, I don't know whether this is an area where others do a lot of research what's happening in the industry right now, but if you look towards other industries, you'll find it's common in transportation to reduce weight to improve fuel consumption. You only got to look at the Dreamliner 787, which is made of carbon fibre composites, and also racing cars, to find examples of reducing energy consumption via a reduction in mass. Now, I'm not suggesting making a mill from carbon fibre, but are there materials around the place that we can use as a basis for more lightweight, large mill constructions? Finally, in this little section, we've got other claims for comminution energy efficiency in the network that are represented by the removal of comminution from the process altogether. Now, maintaining control over particle size distribution during precipitation is one way to do this. Now, in the pharmaceuticals industry, supercritical antisolvents are used to induce precipitation. Now, as I understand the patents when I read them, they also employ acoustic vibration to control particle size. So I had a bit of a think about this and I thought, well, could we employ antisolvents in the alumina industry, for example, to improve precipitation? It'd be an interesting research topic, and one that I found had already been investigated in China in the recovery of alumina from red mud. So these are just some of the interesting things I found interesting as I went through my review. So finally, I thought I'd show you a quick video of how quickly we can develop a patent network. Okay, just turn it on. Now, we'll do it on sorting. In this case, it's as simple as doing a Boolean search. And we found 52,000 different patents looking at sorting. So there's too many results, so we'll reduce the number by narrowing the search. And we'll do it on minerals, waste, or energy, or food. Okay, and that brings us down to around 6,400. We'll just take the top 2,000 at this point. Now we'll save that. So we can do a number of different searches as well. We can look at a signee, we can look at the date that the patent was applied for, you know, the grant date, country of application. The system's extremely flexible for finding different patents in different areas. So we're actually creating the network now. Whilst a bit awkward standing up here while the video's playing while it's doing it. It actually shows the power of the software as it's how quickly we can generate these networks.
How many databases is it looking at?
This is just looking at one at the moment. Okay, so this is the Thomson Reuters patent database. It goes back to about 1960. Okay, so we're able to search all the way back to 1960 on any patent you really want to look at. The news networks, we've got 30,000 different sources of news and blogs, and then the private company database. We haven't finished. The private company database, it allows you to, it's a database that's paid for another company. It's a bit like a Dun & Bradstreet, and we're able to sort through any private company we can get our hands on, and we're able to determine things like where's funding going to in a certain space. So, for example, I looked at a pharmaceutical, for a small pharmaceutical company, I looked at their area of interest in research, and we were able to look at not just only their immediate area of research, but also the wider landscape. And we found that there were funding was going to a lot of other places apart from them. Okay, and could they redirect themselves into areas where they felt, you know, they might be able to make an impact and get more funding. So here we go. The network's just initialising now. We'll stop that, and there's your network ready to go. Okay, and what we can do very quickly, we've found ore and concentrate magnetic minerals. That's one of the segments or clusters that's come up, and we can focus in on that extremely quickly and start searching through it and see what the relationships actually are. That was all of about 3 minutes to be able to produce a network and start interrogating. So when I started down this path 5 years ago, I was just talking to Chris just before I started talking with him while he was working for Vale, I think it was, over in Western Australia, and he was probably probably talking to Chris when I first started thinking about this. When I first started looking at, my mission was to increase the probability of technology identification and collision. Now, I'm really passionate about this, and I really believe that we're at the point that we can really assist people to start looking at things of interest to them and really focusing them in areas very, very quickly, rather than wasting their time looking at the periphery and getting lost in a whole lot of data. So here's just some of the advantages that the company's approach can bring to the interrogation of complex IP networks. We can find existing technology to solve existing problems or improve operational performance. We can find new markets, extend the earning potential of existing technology. We can increase the probability of colliding two technologies together. And I'm not saying that we can actually collide them and do all the work, just increasing the probability of that happening. We're not at the artificial intelligence stage just yet. We can reduce the chance of missing opportunities for development, and we can definitely reduce the cost and schedule. We can bring forward implementation technology solutions to reduce development costs, and we can also increase operational revenue, so we can improve the bottom line more quickly. And we can also assist research and development departments find alternate markets for their products and help them to become self-sustaining. And that's one of the areas where I'm really keen in helping people is we all know that research and development is one of the first things that's cut when money becomes a bit tight. So if we're able to help people find product or find markets for their technology developments and help research and development be funded by those sales, then we can continue our development efforts. So we can improve, or we can provide significant improvements in the quality and results and corresponding reduction in time and cost of analysis. So this was a slide that was developed based on the analysis of two separate news networks. This was undertaken by my software developer, and we just recently confirmed it ourselves at Endellion. So for a network of 1,500 nodes or news stories, it will take us about 5 days to complete the analysis. And at that time, we can go through 1,500 documents and we can identify approximately 25 different market segments. We can review the data and develop meaningful interpretations of the segmentation and reporting. And reporting will add probably another 2 to 3 weeks onto that process. So if we did this normally, sitting down, looking through lines of text on a computer screen, doing Google search, doing literature searches, in 15 days, the teams that did this comparison, they only got through around 200 documents, and they only really uncovered about 5 different market segments. So that's in a news network. In a paper network, it's a bit different. News, you can actually knock out unrepresentative news stories very, very quickly. Papers are a bit harder to do, so you need to spend a bit more time and go into a bit more depth. So here's some value examples. Some of the things we can look at. We can look at mergers and acquisitions, funding trends, like we talked about just before, strategic white spaces. We can identify competition and substitutes. We can do hypothesis or scenario tests. We've got technology collision and crossover. Trends, not only in the technical industries, but also media and network trends. We want supply and demand analysis, and we reduce analysis costs, and we can help companies get their value of their patents on their balance sheets as well. So a couple of examples just over here. We talked about the private companies database just before, where we were helping a pharmaceuticals company find an opportunity for their drug and looking at funding. We look at strategic white spaces. We had an example just before of supercritical anti-solvents, improving precipitation, control of site distribution of precipitation. And we also look at tech collision and crossover. Now, I've got a couple of examples there. Just recently, Tim and I talked about this a while ago, and it is a bit more complex than what I've put on the page just there, but essentially the reflux pacifier is a collision of a lamellar separator and teetered bed separator, and that's currently responsible for about 1.5 billion of coal exports per annum. So shows you the potential of colliding different technologies. There's another one there as well. Company I worked for, Duda. They teamed up with Bayer to look at solutions in the core alkali sector for their electrolytic cells, and the collision of two of their technologies resulted in a 30% reduction in power of an electrolytic cell. Now, if you look at the stats of how much power chlorine production actually takes, that's a huge reduction. There's a real step change in the production of chlorine and the economics associated with it. So, what we're finding as we talk to people like yourselves on a day-to-day basis, that we can do all of this, but we're also only limited by our imagination of what we can actually do right now. So, we've reached the end of the line. Thanks very much. Hope you found it interesting, and hope we've got some time for some questions.
Well, thanks very much, Richard. I mean, the business of this place is research and development and innovation, so this has to be an interesting way to think about the business of where did the next project come from. So, I invite questions from Marshal.
Really interested. Thanks, Richard. The first thing that came to my mind, actually wasn't the first thing, but one of the things that came to my mind was it's a way of taking the drudgery out of literature searches for higher degree students and finding gaps in the known literature for them to be able to tackle and fill as part of their degree research.
Yep.
A couple of questions arising around the use of it. One is a lot of this stuff's on the web as PDF, so you've got some sort of optical character recognition to try to convert images to words that you can search.
What we can do for a lot of, for example, I haven't got a paper database just yet that I've lined up with the software. So what I actually do, if I want to do a quick search on papers, I might go to Google Patent and I might scrape the abstracts off the search, off a Google search, then put that into the software. It's not as accurate as you would like, but it gives you a starting point. We can do it, for example, if you used, Compendex. Haven't tried it on Compendex just yet, but I think you should be able to scrape results off. If Compendex is web-based, you should be able to scrape abstracts off Compendex. If you're looking at PDFs, it takes a little bit longer. So I'll give you an example. I did a network, I can't remember who it was for, and I did the initial Google search and scraped off the data from the Google search, the Google paper search. But then I compared it to another network where I spent probably about 4 or 5 hours. It was about 1,500 papers. I spent the afternoon just basically collecting the text and putting it into the CSV file for each day. So it can be a bit laborious if you haven't got the database there ready to interrogate. But the back end of it, where you put it into a network and then start interrogating, it makes up for that laborious process at the front if you don't have the database there ready to go up front. So I don't use optical character recognition just yet. I haven't needed to so far, but that'll be something that we'll probably have to do.
I was thinking something like, say, the one-line database,
where
it's all just scanned and some of the images are pretty rubbish.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of information in there that would be very useful to look into your analysis.
Yeah, absolutely.
And related to that is how do you deal with things like the capture software that's trying to keep machines out of databases? So if you go to SEDA, for example, they use capture on that. And that'd be really another good source of information about what's going on in the mining industry. And I guess the third related thing is how do you get access to these databases? You actually go and pay people money, or are they free online?
Okay, I try and find as much as free as I possibly can. It's not a cheap thing to do. The software developer who I work with, they've got deals with Thomson Reuters for the patents. Okay, they've got deals with the private company database. I'm not quite sure what they do with the news network, so I think it might just be searched off the internet and dragged in. But we're talking, I've prompted them on a couple of occasions where we're trying to talk to Compendex, also Elsevier, I think it is, about how we can get onto Engineering Index, and can work with those guys. It could become quite expensive if you have to pay for everything, but there's enough freely available information out there as well on the internet. Or so I'm a member of AusIMM, for example, and I've got papers, a lot of papers stored in AusIMM. You can search and you can actually take abstracts and put on as well. So wherever you can find free information or free data. So here at the university, I mean, you guys all use Compendex search system, I'm assuming. Is that still available for you as students? So that can be used as well. So it's, I've got plans to get Compendex into this system, but it's just going to take a bit of time to be able to do that, and agreements, and they've got to protect themselves as well. So it does take a bit of time to be able to do that. Hope that answers the question.
That's one of the questions. Obviously, dealing with something like capture to get into the database point set out is free. You have to go when you type in these obscure numbers and letters to get in.
I haven't used it. I can't comment on that, to be honest with you. I found with things like web scraping that you can be kicked off the system, the Google system, quite quickly if you don't do it in an appropriate way. So if you put a robot around your search, then you're going to be stopped from using it. But if you do things appropriately and go page to page and search, it doesn't take very long to do. That's the big thing with the scraping. You can systemize it quite quickly.
I wanted to ask you, so it was really good, how you would see collaborating with an institution like us?
I have to say I'm not quite sure it's something that we work through. See, obviously I'm private.
Can I see you about that maybe offline then?
Yeah, sure. No worries. Yeah.
With the extension, what Chris was talking about, I can see this huge potential for our students as the beginning of their literature search.
Yes.
And one thing I'd really like to see, how can you connect different networks? Because when our students, or we do literature search, we don't do only one database.
Yeah.
Because patent database is to a large extent to the commercial type of IP. But a lot of IP is there in published literature.
Yeah. What we can do, it's not just limited to databases. You can actually take data and put it into a format in a CSV file. Okay, and then we can import that data directly into the software as well. So you can combine different databases if you need to.
So or can I actually, let's say for example, I got the patent database, let's say I got the UQ library, I got other libraries, all those things.
Yep.
Is it possible for the student, if he wants to start a new topic which he would like to see, what is the potential research in that? Can he actually use this tool to go and then search all these things to identify where are the linkages as a beginning point for them to go dive deeper?
They can. What I would say is what you have to do first, if you're trying to use the software, the search inside the software, okay, the one I showed you when we were developing the sorting patent network, that interrogates a database that is linked to the network. Okay, so you would have to go out to whatever database you want to use, do a typical Boolean search. I mean, that's all this is a Boolean search on specific terms. You would take the data, you would put it into fields of on a CSV file, okay, and then you could combine that with a patent network as well and put it into the same file. You could combine it with any other different database you want to combine it with. You're just you're limited by your imagination on what you can do in terms of combining the data. I will say, sorry, that once you start to get past anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 nodes inside the network, it does tend to become a bit cumbersome at some points. So really you want to, when you do a search outside the network itself, you want to really search your data by relevance. Okay, put it into relevant, say if you're looking at 3 different databases, take the top 1,000 from 3 different databases and come up with a 3,000 node network. That seems to be around the optimal side of things you can do.
I'm trying to make life too easy for the students.
No, let's start so they can dive deeper later on.
Along this topic, I used something about a year ago that was developed at UQ. Along this line, it searches Science Direct, I think, and it gets all the references
Yes.
and looks at the linking between the referencing of the journal articles. I can't remember what it's called. I've been trying to search it out,
Okay.
but I can't remember exactly what it's called. Have you been in contact with that at all?
No, I know there is some software by one of the news networks or something that does something similar, but none of the software I know actually visualises it like this. So
this one did. It had the nodes and it visualized it.
right.
It was a website, so you did it through a website. You do the
And this is it might be the same company I'm working with now.
potentially be, but I know that it was developed through UQ. I don't know if anyone else ever used it.
I don't know. Actually, are you familiar with software developed by some Indian guy called Pine?
No.
Okay, so all of these are spin-offs of that software.
Okay, fair enough.
So what does, and if you look, one of my actually friends from the high school, Marshal, D knows, he's a professor at the university. He uses the same network, and what he developed actually was links. He was looking the relationship within the Bible,
Yep.
and then later on he used that to do in novel Anna Karenina.
Yep.
So what he said is, what is really important is how we define the links. Okay? Because he said the picture what we got from the Bible was not a real picture, because there was too many kings with 7 sons and 7 daughters, and so it wasn't realistic what you actually see there.
Yeah.
So my comment to this, first comment would be, it is very important to realize the connection between the terms
Yes.
that we use and how we define them. For example, if we say that one term is in relation with the other, just by being in the same paragraph, it's a very loose linkage, okay? So we have to actually be more precise how we define the linkages between these terms. So that's the first comment. The second comment, because I worked with Rio Tinto from 2007, I can comment on this, why that there was a huge jump in the patents. The huge jump is because when the company have money, as you said, making patents is really expensive. Okay, so when the company have money, they invest in patents to actually protect their knowledge. When the downtime is like now, nobody gives a damn.
No.
Nobody gives a damn, because especially with the world patents, because world patents are really expensive compared to the local patents. Okay? And there's a huge difference when you apply for the local patent and for the world patent, especially if you want to. And the other thing is, when we try to protect patents, we try to protect them mostly in Canada, US, South America, and Europe. But there's a whole different other markets, such as China, such as India, and all the others. The other thing which I have to comment upon is that big research and development centers like RioHab or BHP, they actually have outsourced some of the research, like in India and China.
Yep.
And this is when you apply a patent with the Rio Tinto, you actually have to say whether it comes from the center from India, China, Australia, Canada, UK, or some other. So there's a specific jump when it comes from China. Well, it comes from again, companies which invested in the specific centers within the India or China or the others. That's all.
I agree with your comment definitely about search relevance and finding relevance between the terms. That is very key. I mean, I was very careful in my example here, just not to apply combination energy efficiency to everything. I was trying to find the reasons why things weren't relevant as well, and that's very important to do.
And this is specific, I'm sorry to tell, but this is really important because of those white spaces, opportunities that are on the side. So, if we want to pinpoint the right one, we have to define the right connection between the terms that we want to investigate. Because the pictures which you showed us, they're just pictures of bounded. If I define the connections, differently. They'll be completely different, and those white spaces will change and move. And you know that as
Yes,
well.
absolutely.
Because they can move, if I just define or to end, they will either go shorter or they will either go wider.
Okay, before we get halfway into a second seminar, which we will get
Sorry.
we have run out of time, so I'll allow one more question.
Not question, but just one thing. So that you mentioned a paper from Peter on Earth energy recovery, and it happened on one of the reviewer of the paper, Mineral Engineering Journal. And it's interesting. It's make a strong recommendation for publication of this paper, because I mentioned that currently industry and research focus on save the energy consumption, but he used another angle to recover the energy from the consumption sector. So from that point, it's a new should be published, but also I make some comment for modification. Happen the other reviewer make a very critical on this paper. He said that number one, it's very difficult to be implemented in industry. Number two, is there is no data to support this approach, this value. So you make a recommendation, I forget whether it's a reject or downgrade into a technical note or something like that. But interesting is that the editor eventually picked my comment and allowed him to revise and publish it.
Okay. You did look at it from a different angle, and I think it's important that you look at everything from a different angle. You know, it's we don't develop and we don't make new technologies, we don't progress further if we don't look at things from a different perspective. And it's really, really important we do that. We can get stuck in a box, and we don't know what we don't know. And so if we look at things from a different perspective, then all of a sudden, we find new and interesting things to actually to develop and do and take us in new different directions.
I think that's a great comment to finish on, and obviously the vigour of the questioning reflects the interest generated. Richard, and I'm sure you're happy to stay on and
absolutely
talk to us afterwards. And I have to congratulate you on the talk, the presentation, and also the courage with which you showed running this stuff in real time, which is usually asking for serious trouble. The fact that you got away with it is a great compliment to you. So folks, would you join me in thanking Richard for